So my name is Amanda Aldridge, and I first came to St David's Hospital as a student nurse in 1986, and I'm still employed with the same health board, and I now work with child and adolescent mental health services. So I started my training in 1986, and one of the reasons being attracted to the hospital when I came up was the fact that they had a really lovely uniform. And not only did you have a really lovely uniform, you also had an absolutely super cape that came with the uniform, and it was a really thick woolen cape. It was red on the inside and black on the outside. And at that time, the hospital used to have its own sewing room, so you'd be sent up to the sewing room to have your uniform altered. And of course, being really short, I inevitably had to spend far more time in the sewing room than anybody else. But the uniforms were absolutely lovely, and it made you feel like a proper nurse, especially when you had the cape that crisscrossed around the front and it buttoned at the back, and it was just really kept you warm, because we had to walk a huge distance in between the wards because it was such a big hospital. And I remember the first week I started, and coming into the hospital grounds, and every, say, like 20 feet, there would be a little pile of little stones. And this sort of, you know, I used to ponder how on earth have they got these little pile of stones every 20 feet or so. And then one day, when I was coming back into the hospital, I saw a long stay patient. Apparently, that's all he used to do all day, was make these little piles of stones. He'd go all the way around the hospital, making these little piles of stones. And then sometimes other patients wouldn't be very nice to him, and they would knock over the stones, and then he'd have to start again. And I remember that sticking in my mind, thinking, you know, oh, it's such a shame that somebody's knocked these little pile of little stones down. But the grounds were absolutely superb, and the hospital itself, particularly the grounds, had a really nice ambience about it, really peaceful. You know, the type of place that if you needed to recuperate and spend some, you know, relaxing time in the gardens, that you could, you know. It was a really lovely hospital like that in terms of the grounds. And the chapel itself, I got very friendly with a patient and his wife, and they'd actually met in St David's Hospital and ended up marrying in St David's Hospital. And the chapel was just so beautiful, you know, with the stained glass and everything. It was a really, really lovely chapel. And whilst I was on the wards there, I distinctly remember, because the allotments were still up and running then, so like once a week somebody would come onto the wards with like bags of potatoes, bags of carrots, bags of onions to sell to the staff or patients. And it was almost like a family in a lot of respects. And, you know, all throughout my training, which was 3 years, it was I was there for about a year, then they changed it to non-uniform. So I lost my lovely cape. Well, I didn't lose it, it just had to be packed away. And my lovely white dress with the lovely belt, that got packed away as well. So, and they then changed the wards from all male to mixed. That was a big change as well. But prior to that, when I worked on Solver ward, which was an all-male ward, I remember within the first week of my nurse training being chased by an amorous gentleman up and down the corridors who'd taken a bit of shine to me. And that corridor, because the corridors were long in between the wards anyway, but that corridor seemed 20 miles longer than what it actually was. And, you know, I'd be running down the corridor away from this gentleman who was rather amorous, and I was thinking, oh my God, I don't think mental health nursing is for me, because obviously he was really unwell at the time. And I remember that distinctly, but thankfully I stuck at it. And I was there must have been about a year after there was a scandal that had broken out about the nurses' home in I think it was the Sunday Express or one of the Sunday tabloid newspapers, about the antics of the nurses' home, because I used to live in the nurses' home. But I have to categorically say I was never involved in any of those antics whatsoever. And the nurses' home had actually got quite boring by the time I was there, because they'd also employed like a matron over the nurses' home, so we had to behave ourselves. Having said that, we did have a few wild parties, and quite often patients would wander down into the nurses' home because the door was hardly ever locked. And people were always very friendly and welcoming. And you know, throughout my years in St David's Hospital, I can honestly say, you know, I always treated patients with respect and kindness, and you know, I know some people probably report that they didn't have perhaps nice treatment there, but it was not, you know, I'd never ever witnessed anybody that didn't have care up to standard or cruelly treated or anything like that. You know, like you hear in another hospital, I don't know, perhaps, you know, it's just that I didn't see it, but you know, they were like a family to you, and I think because I was working on a long stay ward as well, you really got to know the patients, and I think that made a big difference, and you got really attached to the patients. And one of the patients that I got really attached to, I looked after him for about 4 years, and I was working in rehab, and I looked after him in rehab. Then he got moved to St Anne's ward, which was a ward with physical health problems as well, and they moved me at the same time. And it was the only way they could get him to agree to move was by saying, oh, Mandy's going, you know, you'll be all right, Mandy's going. So he agreed to move at the same time, and there were significant changes going on in the hospital at the time, and his one job was laying the cutlery in the staff canteen, because we used to have a staff canteen. And of course, when that all changed, they took that away from him, and he started to deteriorate then when the modernisation started to come in, because he felt as if he, you know, didn't have a job anymore. And then he moved wards, and anyway, he used to tell me, you know, he was such a lovely gentleman, and I just couldn't understand how he'd ended up in a psychiatric hospital. And he was telling me that the reason he'd ended up in St David's was that when he was 15 or 16, he was driving the cart with the milk churns in, and accidentally tipped it, and the milk had gone everywhere. And his boss had given him a row, and then he'd beaten up the boss, and that's how he'd ended up in St David's Hospital. And he was a really cantankerous gentleman, I have to say. But I really loved looking after him. And he would refuse to have a bath for the day staff. When I was on nights, he'd always check who was on nights. And he'd say, oh, is Mandy on? And they'd say yes. So he would refuse to bath for the daytime staff, and he'd wait till I came on in the night. And the other staff were really cross with me, because they used to say, well, nobody else gets this treatment, and he should be bathed in the daytime, because that's when we bath patients. And I used to say, but it's individual choice. I'm not complaining about having to come in and put him in the, we had like a Medibath thing that you know, press this button and they went into this like portable bath thing. I said, I'm not complaining about it. So I used to go in, and you know, all the staff would be not very happy with me, and they'd say, oh, Stan wants his bath, and you refused to have it earlier on, he wants to wait for you to do it. So then I used to put him in the bath, and then as I was drying his toes, he used to say to him, oh, Mandy, nobody dries my toes like you do. They never wipe in between my toes. And I just, oh, I love that gentleman to bits. I absolutely loved him to bits. And when he passed away, and he had to have like equivalent to a pauper's funeral, you know, nobody turned up. We had the funeral in the church and chapel in St David's Hospital. There was only a handful of us. And he was also very friendly with the domestic, and the two of us clubbed together, and we bought a little wooden cross. And we paid for it to get it engraved, because we didn't want him not to have anything. So I remember that, and he was such a lovely, lovely gentleman. Yeah, so you do remember your favourites, and I'm sure, you know, the patients had their favourite staff as well, you know. And I met a lot of really nice people there, really good people. And then another lady that I looked after for many, many years, she didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, yet every Christmas she would, you know, give me a box of chocolates or things like that. And, you know, the NMC come up with these ridiculous rules that you're not allowed to accept gifts or things like that. But if I had given her the box of chocolates back, or, you know, whatever, she would have been absolutely so upset, so upset. And she was a lovely, lovely lady, her and her husband, and I looked after her for many, many years. It was a community psychiatric nurse. So my career has sort of gone full circle, really, because when I was in adult mental health in the inpatient unit, patients were quite often overly medicated. You know, we'd have the belt and braces approach with the deco injections plus high doses of oral antipsychotics as well. And the side effects of that, seeing people walk around in a zombied state, was not very pleasant. And thank God, psychiatry has come along so far since then in terms of medication and talking therapies and things, which, you know, it needed to, things like that did need to improve. So you don't see so much of that these days. And I can honestly say, I'm not sure whether it's to do with my employees or what, but I've worked in mental health now for 30 years, and I've loved every minute of it. I just think I picked the right career, and I've had so much out of it, as well as you'd like to think you've made a little bit of difference as well, but I feel I've had so much out of it. And I think that the Institute, although it's not there anymore as it was, but a lot of people, it was their lifeline. Yeah, so I remember then one day, you know, on the Friday I'd finished work, and we always had a sign outside the hospital, St David's Hospital, and there was a bus stop just further down the way, and it's where we always used to catch the bus if we were going into town from the nurse's home. And I'd driven home on the Friday, and I came back to work on the Monday, and the sign of St David's Hospital had actually gone. And I thought, oh my God, and this huge sense of loss that I felt, and grief, you wouldn't believe it. And I was thinking, my God, if I feel like that, and I've only worked here for 20 odd years or whatever, you know, how do other people feel, especially those that had actually had St David's Hospital as a home? The fact that we hadn't been given any warning, and I know probably people would say it was only a sign, but to me that was just such a significant part of the hospital. The county council sign came up, St David's Park or whatever it was, and I just thought, oh my God, you know, it was just felt awful. It was just an awful feeling. And a lot of people who've been in St David's Hospital for many years will say that, you know, I remember we lost a load of patients that died when they were, you know, transferred from an elderly ward into, say, like a private nursing home or residential home or whatever. The death rate during that time was pretty significant. And can I just go back to Stan as well? Let me just tell you this little story. When I worked in St Anne's ward and Stan was there, we had a really progressive working sister called Karen, who was there for quite a few years as well, and she was quite progressive in her ideas. So I said to her one day, oh, let's take the patients on holiday, because they were all really elderly, and we didn't know how much longer they would have, and some of them hadn't been on holiday well, some of them had never been on holiday. And so luckily she said, oh yeah, that's a good idea, because at that time you weren't allowed to take patients away. So we only went down to the caravan park in Kidwelly, but because I knew of Stan's tale about the milk churn and what have you, as a surprise I arranged for him to have a ride in a horse-drawn wagon thing, and I had to arrange for the porters to come with a special lift for the wheelchair. And the palaver we had, that poor horse was so patient, we had to get the back ramp from the ambulance right next to the back of the wagon that dropped down in order for us to push the wheelchair on it. Well, of course, every time the horse went like that and rested a foot, you were out by half an inch. So it must have taken us about a good 30 minutes just to get the wheelchair on it, and Stan was effing and blinding like that, but we did eventually get him on there. And that trip, when we got back to the ward then a couple of days later, he said, Mandy, he said, thank you so much, that absolutely made my life. He said, you know, that was absolutely brilliant. And then about 2 weeks later, of the 6 people that we'd taken on holiday, about 50% had passed away, and I honestly think that they were so looking forward to going away, it was that kept them going. So I'm so glad that we did that. I'm so glad that we did that. So I've got a lot of fond memories of the institution. Yeah, lots of fond memories. I think it's about treating people as people. They are people first and foremost, not patients, not, you know, and it's just about giving people common courtesy and not being afraid to show that you care. I think that's really important, because I think now nursing as a profession now has gone so much more academic. I think we need to go back to basics in a lot of it as well, and not be, fighting to show the fact that you are a human being yourself. That's the most important message, I think.